Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today is Friday, November 11th. I am starting really late, so I want to just jump into this game very quickly. And here's a typical example of an update. They said they were going to stop really doing that, or at least they implied that they were going to stop requiring you to click OK to download things on the Steam client version, and yet it still made me click OK before it started downloading. There's kind of no point for that. Like, you're launching a online only game, really, that there isn't much single player content. You're making the assumption by even launching the app that you have no limitations on your internet, like you wouldn't get charged for using too much, or you wouldn't have a limited amount of data per month. And I think, at least in the West, very few people, well, maybe it's unfair to say the West in that case. Maybe it's more fair to say most people in the United States have unlimited internet on PC connections and household connections. So they're removing a day, or exactly 24 hours from the sales time of Cosmic Ocean. I've increased the new item, the number of deck slots, although I don't know why they're specifically... Oh, it seems almost like you have to buy this item. Yeah, ridiculous. So they're going to charge you to have more deck slots, which isn't really going to work too well, considering how you really only need the default number of deck slots anyways. You really only need about 2 of them. Team battle mode has been added. Well, isn't this at that point Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Crosslinks? The other Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that I've been saying since they launched it a couple of months ago really should have just been a feature in Master Duel. Players compete 3 versus 3 or 5 versus 5s. You can recruit teams. So there's this like whole team battle mode. I hope I don't get daily quests around that. There's also plenty of issues here that I imagine if you really cared you could read, or you could just ignore it. Seems like this update, in adding new features, also is trying to address some flaws. A lot of these, I imagine, are also text flaws, as far as they just look differently. Alright, so let's look at the decks first. I have room for 19. I have 19 decks, apparently, which I find that even hard to believe. How could that be 19? 6, 12, 18, 19. Okay. So there's 6 extra decks here. There's a new item here that's just called a card database. Try linking with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Card case. By following this step, you'll be able to import deck lists from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card database deck editor, as well as export them. So they've just made yet another app, as it were, to let you manage your deck lists. And I can almost understand why you might want to do that, because of the mess they've created. Having so many different Yu-Gi-Oh! Games that they're supporting at the same time is to have what would be kind of the equivalent of a Pokemon Home, where all your deck lists live separately and can be cross-connected, while still they're able to overcharge you by having you open packs in multiple games to get the exact same cards multiple times over. The problem with that, of course, is Pokemon Home itself is a confusing mess, and nobody really has engaged with it much, as far as I've ever heard. And yeah, this sounds like a confusing mess. So apparently I could just spend a ton of money to get 5 more deck slots. And I'm willing to say no to this. This is a really high price for no benefit at all. While there might be a slight concern that a protector like this for 100 might go away, so I'll waste gems on that. Or that this avatar icon that I'll never use, and I have no idea who even this character is, might go away, so I'll waste 50 gems on that. It's just asking too much at 250. And since this is the new one, let's see, all cards, your cards. This is the question. Is this a deck that I'd want to engage with to try to get more copies of these cards? I think the answer is no. They've either cycled back into in a selection deck that I've already dealt with and gotten a decent amount of cards with, or they've reset the Cosmic Ocean and that was the expansion before. I don't think that's true though. And this didn't change. I may simply just be at a case. Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to open this pack of cards than the other, and I guess we'll do that. Although we don't really have a ton of cards, ton of gems to do it with. Like, I open a 10 pack now, maybe I need to open another 10 pack. Then I only have 20 potentially for any secret packs that unlock. I think I'd prefer to just kind of wait. I will open these because I'm just constantly getting these. Although these cards are also constantly proving themselves to be kind of useless. Like, any new card deck is going to be fairly useless. I will certainly engage with that mobile phone deck list app and check it out and try it out, because that is potentially a way in which I could import better top tier meta decks from some website, copy and paste them, and engage with that. I assume you can import and not just export. Or did it just say export? We need to go back and check. Because if you could only export from Master Duel into the other app, that's not that useful. But assuming you can import, then I could see myself having a much quicker experience of going to a website, finding a meta duel, a meta deck, and doing the right thing. Let's see. You'll have a game card ID, enter it and password to proceed with registration. Yeah, you will be able to import deck lists from Yu-Gi-Oh! Card Database Deck Editor as well as export them. Okay. So it is import and export. Good. Also, apparently I finished a mission somehow. Or I just got new missions. None of these say Team Duel. Thank goodness there's no new row here that says Team Duel. As much as I would kind of like to check out Team Duel, which is just now here. Let's see. Forbidden Limit Combination, first standard, second standard, preferred, standard, select deck. Change deck. Let's try just our Zodiac. Select deck. I guess you could search by team. 3 versus 3 is probably better than 5 versus 5. Let's just see if we can join a team. And let's see if we can do anything. The difference maybe is in this that versus a cross-duel battle. Cross-duel battles, I think your cards can actually interact with each other. So, yeah. This may very well be that you're working as a team, but you're playing very standard one-on-one fights. So 3 versus 3 means 3 games against 3 enemies. Yeah. So I can already tell by just the way this is being displayed, this is not a cross-link battle in which 3 people are sitting on the same side of a table and their cards would interact with your cards and all of that. So there is still definitely a argument to try to bring cross-link battles into Master Duel and just bring in Duel Links into Master Duel and just bring in all the different variations of ways in which you can play Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh, speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh! I saw somebody had taken the meme image of a guy went to a Magic the Gathering tournament with like a deck made up of like hundreds of cards, because tournament rules specifically for Magic the Gathering used to have no deck limit at all. You could just have any number of cards. You also didn't really lose if you ran out of cards like you did in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Being a newer card game always had a deck limit of some amount. I think the amount has changed. And almost every format of Magic the Gathering nowadays does have certain limits, and every tournament certainly has a deck limit. But somebody took that meme image and put it on Facebook, I think is where I saw it, where they said that it was a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament and that was a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. So, yeah. Fake news in the card game genre, as it were, by just changing it from Magic the Gathering to Yu-Gi-Oh! And I could certainly see why a meme or spammer might do that too. Is like you take that one image, you change the text 3 different ways. You say Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, trading card game, and then you've got 3 different audiences and 3 different pictures that you can slowly put on as a meme, and nobody will really question it. So you've just tripled your output of meme art creation. What you get for tripling your output for meme art creation, I have no idea. Like clout, I assume it's just stupid clout chasing would be the only thing I could imagine, unless there are just Russian bot farms out there that are literally paying people to make memes about Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games. There's something else I wanted to say and now I've forgotten it. Let's see if I can remember it here for a second. Oh. Well, I guess I should, as far as meme art creation, somewhat connected to that. Apparently there is a big thing going on with DeviantArt. Now this doesn't really have too much to do with video games. DeviantArt is a website known for artists who like to post adult content and art styles that are in the more goth style, darker imagery. It's not goth, really. Goth is the wrong word. I would say most of DeviantArt is adult in nature. Unlike, say, what Tumblr was trying to be, even though Tumblr did also become very much adult in nature and then kicked off the nudity and then is now bringing back some nudity but not all nudity. But DeviantArt really embraced that. There's also just more niche weird art on DeviantArt. And I don't really know a community-based site for art of other styles that would really even compare. Like, Tumblr came along much later than DeviantArt, so Tumblr was more of a social media type site where it would be about following individual creators and not having a general vibe of what to expect there. Where if you get on DeviantArt long enough, you pretty much know where it's going to go. Most artists are going to have a style and only show that one style. There's a lot of live action photography, nudity in DeviantArt too. There's a lot of bondage and like shibari rope tying, shibari, not shibari, rope tying images in DeviantArt. I mean, it really was the place to go for a higher level of quality compared to going to like Pornhub, which is going to be more about video, where DeviantArt is still images. I don't even know if they ever really got to an animated image level. And that was one of the major best points, is that you tended not to just have something that had no artistic merit and wasn't really trying for any artistic merit in DeviantArt. One of the probably most successful, notable contributors to DeviantArt is the creator of a comic called Sunstone, that I follow on Twitter, and that's how I'm getting most of this news, although I also follow DeviantArt in general. Sunstone being a romance comic story following the relationship of a bondage exhibitionist artist who like goes to parties and shows off bondage presentations. Well, the big thing, sorry to take too long to get to the point here, the big thing is DeviantArt announced a stabilized diffusion like event or algorithm, and in part of that I think they were trying to be the good guys and say that there was going to be a system to opt out people, but they did not express it well, obviously, because there is now a initial knee-jerk hate reaction to this announcement, because it definitely comes off as, by default, everybody's art that they've been posting to DeviantArt for decades now, at least well over 1 decade, is going to be default used as a trainer image for this stabilized diffusion artificial intelligence image generator called DreamUp. That doesn't, and real artists have a real problem with potentially allowing an AI to learn to make images that look exactly like those real artists, because it's putting them out of business. It's just so literally putting them out of business. This is the closest thing we will ever experience to the death of like typesetters as a career once the electric printing presses were created. There used to be many people that were getting paid to set the stamps of letters in the right place for a newspaper every day, and those were called typesetters. And yeah, that eventually went away as a job. You could probably use a slightly more recent reference of the death of like Newsies, News Kids, but newspaper delivery people still kind of exist, even if most of that is gone and it wasn't replaced by just the technology. The Stagecoach also more slowly destroyed compared by train or car delivery or other ways of transporting people. But yeah, typesetting in particular, I think people just lost their jobs overnight on that. And yeah, that's what AI art is going to do. Inherently, the problem here, without trying real hard not to get into a economics rant, is that art can never really be in line with capitalism. It just can't. Art should be free. Art has to be free. Art really doesn't have a value because it's not something people really need. I don't know why I activated that. That was kind of dumb, but whatever. So, unless we get to a point where it's just a patron system or universal basic income, where artists don't starve to death literally, artists are in this weird position where they are trying to sell their creations and trying their very best to not be forced into making art that they wouldn't naturally have made anyways. I guess a capitalist inspiration versus a divine inspiration to create art, or a muse inspiration to create art, whichever phrase you might want to use. But yeah, there is just always that split. And I imagine most deviant artists on DeviantArt really haven't sold a lot, really haven't made a lot of money selling things. There was never, as far as I know, any way to like run ads alongside. Interesting. Team match victory. Win. So 2 people won on our side, one on that, and that's a team battle. Well, that's better than what I thought it would be, because I thought it would be a tournament, and you can certainly see how a tournament would potentially come about from this. And so, okay, you name the teams, which seems unnecessary. Seems like that's a waste of time to every time have to give the team a name, and then the way to give them a name is to select a card. So that's the name of your team. Why not just randomize that at that point, or at least have a random button? But yeah, almost certainly they should start taking a chunk out of this side of the screen. Although maybe on mobile you only really see the screen and then you have to swipe right to get to the events. But yeah, for desktop, start taking some of this out, and and yeah, start making more progress on that. And of course, they need to think about a tournament mode like that. The exact same team battle, but instead of winning after one victory, you then are asked to take on the next person in the team and then the next person in the team. So it would be a, well, I guess that's not even a tournament is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking more of a, we're gonna do 5 games if it's a 5 versus 5 run. That's more of a round robin competition. You could make a tournament around that, but it definitely wouldn't be a brackets tournament. It would be some other kind of tournament, and I'm just not familiar enough with how you would organize tournaments to know the right word for that. But yeah. So yeah, DeviantArt announced this new AI thing. People are not happy with DeviantArt. Give it a week and maybe they will smooth it over. The DeviantArt is definitely coming back and saying, hey, no, this isn't what we meant. We're gonna fix this and we're gonna make this easier for people to opt out. The big problem here is you just never opt in anybody. It is never the right action. It is never the right move to opt in people, and people should know that by now. On the other hand, DeviantArt as a website probably costs quite a bit to run, and I don't think they really get that much income. They probably get a cut on a Patreon-like system that existed, I imagine, before Patreon did, for the DeviantArtist, because you do support the DeviantArtist in a Patreon-like system, and then that does unlock more content. I will say also, DeviantArt as a website has definitely been like more confusing than you would think to use if you're just a lurker trying to look at other artists' creations. And there isn't a better service there. And I guess if I was going to try to make a Twitter competitor, I might look towards specializations in some kind of everything app where there would be a special tab just for artists, like visual art, and then podcasters, and then musicians, and just really try and break up all the possible different things that would have been separate apps into separate tabs. And maybe it wouldn't be separate tabs so much as more of a attempt at a unified field. Special summon another Zodiac monster. That's enough of talking about DeviantArt though. I'll keep an eye on it and see if there's anything else that happens. For the accountability section, Darkest Dungeon has just defeated me and I've completely lost interest in it, and so I made the last episode and now I'm just kind of thinking about what the next game I will cover is, and I need to upload some footage too, so, and free up some hard drive space. And I'm still doing the final bits of writing up the instructions for my guest Wi-Fi project, but I'll probably be done with that over this weekend if I work on it. Some of my irrigation project has gotten too cold, and so I'm putting that off until summer, which, if anything, this leaves me with not that many projects to actually work on between now and spring, summer, whatever comes after winter. Um, but yeah, Darkest Dungeon was way too slow of a game, and I never really enjoyed it. I tried to take on the Darkest Dungeon with max level 6 characters, and got maybe about halfway through beating the first of 3 bosses in the Darkest Dungeon runs with my best team, and then with my second best team didn't even get to the final boss, the first of 3 final bosses, and then I ran it with just some really low level characters just to see what would happen there, and nothing happened there. They just died. So all the gameplay basically I've been doing for somewhere between 30 and 60 hours in Darkest Dungeon was not really worth it, or helping in any way to let's just go ahead and activate this just for the fun of it. It was just not really helping at all to make me a better player, or make me more set up and prepared to take on the final boss. Basically, the game just wastes your time. And I can't help but assume that for the long list of Kickstarter backers in the credits, that well over 2/3 of the credits are just names of people who kickstarted the game. I can only assume that they got the game in early access. They had a very different experience than what the final product is. They weren't playing with the DLC enabled, which, by the way, it says the menu says you can enable DLC at any time on any of the save files. It doesn't tell you you can't disable it once you've enabled it effectively. So I never even played the Crimson Court DLC. I turned it on and it didn't do anything because of the way the Crimson Court DLC is set up. You have to basically have it turned on at the beginning of your gameplay 60 hours you're going to put into it, and it's just going to make the game even harder. I suspect a lot of the DLC I enabled may have made the game less focused, which effectively made it harder. I was playing on the easiest difficulty, and it wasn't helping me at all by being on the easiest difficulty. It's not explaining anything to you. The game UI is awful. The game is bad. And it's just another sad example of giant bomb hype and mainstream video game journalists getting hyped around a game. And it's not just mainstream video game journalists that gets around hyped. Sometimes it is just the gamer community in general on Reddit that gets hyped. But my sources of who I would maybe consider peers in the gaming community constantly seem to be leading me down the wrong path more than they're leading me down the right path. Maybe I'm just not in line with most gamers, but yeah, I think I have enough experience to form a professional opinion and critique around Darkest Dungeon, and under that assumption, I don't think it's a good game for what it's trying to be and what it's trying to do. It is a mushy middle game as far as RPG games. It's overly complicated with no benefits of it being overly complicated. It's slow because it's turn-based. It's slow because it has too many fast animations. The real truth is, as I was trying to think of a better version of a game like Darkest Dungeon, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is probably the kind of game you should play, and is the best comparison, because Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think, still does have turn-based actions. It is in kind of a fantasy type world. It is not quite a Cthulhu-esque dark fantasy, thing. Cthulhu Saves Christmas is probably a turn-based RPG if you just want Cthulhu. So Darkest Dungeon is kind of standing out there for its visuals. It's not standing out at all though for its story, because there just isn't any story. There's no characterization on any of the characters you play as. They only characterize the ancestor. They don't characterize any of the characters that run shops in the town. The town gameplay mechanic doesn't really help you much, and it's really just there to kind of waste your time some more. What I would have done if I was the person in charge of making Darkest Dungeon better, what I would do is convert it into a mobile game. I would have the estate have a mechanic like a mobile game where you add peasants. The more peasants you add through each success, or you save the peasants, the more they give you resources in the form of gold. Every day you maybe have some daily quests, so you come back and do one Darkest Dungeon run every day. But if you don't play the game for a week and come back, then you may get like a maximum of 10,000 gold. That solves a major problem with Darkest Dungeon as it is, in that money just gets thrown away, and you're never going to have enough money, not in a reasonable amount of time. There's nothing you can do in a reasonable amount of time in Darkest Dungeon as it stands. But yeah, you're just never really going to have enough money to do anything. Upgrade everybody, and even if you could upgrade everybody, it doesn't help. The dungeons that you run to have an infestation level, which this never really gets explained, and so the more low-level runs you do to potentially grind up, the more infested and the more difficult a region becomes. And there's a limited number of regions, and the infestation level never goes down, so there's just like no reset. There's no helping at all, and it just creates a bad experience, a bad gameplay loop, a boring gameplay loop. The fact it takes 6 seconds to show an animation, an attack animation, is crazy. Yeah, some of the more Japanese RPGs like Moeiro Chronicles at least lean on having more characters and more fandom around that if you're going to have that grind. And if you're in an action RPG, the grind can be a lot faster. Inherently, I do have to admit, maybe I am just not a fan of actual RPG games. I may only really be a fan of games that have RPG elements in it, but not fans of actual RPG games. I also tried to play Disgaea, and I had problems certainly with Disgaea too, being too slow, being too complicated. I definitely would combine a lot of elements and factors in Darkest Dungeon that don't really matter. The fact that there's a disease resist and a bleed resist, and then there's a whole stress mechanic, and then you have weapons and armor that play very little of a role, so it doesn't quite make sense that you couldn't just combine them into one upgrade, or not even have weapons and armor as a thing. There's just too many stats overall. And many of these stats that are in Darkest Dungeon don't do anything, or they don't feel like they do anything. Having your speed increased is something you should have happen, but it's not something that you inherently will feel like it's better by having your speed higher. a lot of what Darkest Dungeon also feels like is somebody who is a fan of playing Dungeons and Dragons, or a game like Dungeons and Dragons, or more accurately, probably somebody who's closer to a fan of something like Hero Quest, which is actually a board game, whereas Dungeons and Dragons is more of a tabletop game. Feels like somebody who likes that kinds of games decided to make a digital version of that and didn't really know what they were doing and didn't really see where you could improve or give a different kind of experience by making a Dungeons and Dragons or Hero Quest game in the digital format, and instead was just trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. Like, I really have a hard time thinking that the creator of Darkest Dungeon really was a gamer or played a lot of games. Now, inherently, there are a ton of Japanese RPGs out there, and almost certainly a lot of them are really bad as far as user interface, too. But, yeah. There are definitely more relevant RPGs, Japanese RPGs, out there that deserve to be played before something like Darkest Dungeon should be played, in my opinion. It's hard to name a lot of them though, off the top of my head, because the names all blur together. In other ways, my experience with Darkest Dungeon also is kind of oddly the opposite experience of like Hand of Fate, which I liked Hand of Fate, and it feels very much like Hand of Fate is very similar to Darkest Dungeon, and yet it's just done better. Let's see if I can go ahead and summon this character. I don't think I'm gonna win in this turn, but yeah, you never know. Although, in all fairness, for time-saving sake, and just because I really am not that passionate about Darkest Dungeon, I think I'll leave it at that. Like, I could go on, certainly, and I did at the last episode, but yeah, I really was just doing a mercy killing more than a rage quit, because I was wasting my time and my viewers' time at that point, just continuously playing. Let's start going through the video game news. These streams have gotten longer and longer, and I don't have yet to figure out a better way to speed this up. Let's see. Video Games Chronicles has some more Modern Warfare 2 stuff. This might have been a repetitive article. The ousted Disco Elysium developers look set for a court battle with studio owners. Yeah, I said in the last episode, this situation definitely is headed to a court battle. The devs alleged that they were defrauded, while the ZAUM owners accused the former employees of misconduct. Of course, I thought the devs actually had seats on the board and actually owned part of the company, and that it wasn't just former employees. So how that's being reported seems slightly different from my remembering. But maybe that wasn't the case. Yep. Let's see. Here's a new story. Miyamoto acknowledges it's easier than ever to offer backwards compatibility, but the Nintendo director is non-committal on plans for future Nintendo hardware. There is definitely some rumors going around and some evidence that we've seen that dev kits for whatever Nintendo's next console is going to be are in the hands of some developers. That being said, I assume it's going to be a Switch 2 and called the Switch 2. Although the little 2 symbol here implies you would kind of need a number 2. That's what I assume they're just going to do. More power, more hardware, and a name iteration. That being said, there's never been a numerical continuation of any Nintendo console. The NES was replaced with a Super NES, Nintendo 64, GameCube, Wii U got a letter upgrade, which caused confusion, so they may very well try to avoid that and come up with a brand new name. So, thinking here real quickly, is there a word that would replace Switch and be better globally? Well, this was named Switch because you could switch how you're holding the controllers, and that gimmick really wasn't even used that much or like that much, in my opinion, as far as the Switch goes. It's still trying to hang on to the Joy-Con concepts, and I assume that they're going to try and hang on to that. Super Switch might be the right move. Just go back to that naming convention. That keeps the Switch in the name, but does somewhat imply that it isn't just a Switch only improvement, that you need a Super Switch. But I think they probably would want a completely different name. Although going with the Super Switch is not a terrible thought, since the Switch has sold very well. But yeah, I imagine the form factor is going to be very much similar to this. It might be a little bit bigger for an aging, growing up audience, but maybe it'll be the exact same size to catch new sales on the younger brothers and sisters of kids that have Switches now. I would love to see them take it to a completely different extreme and have a dock and just call it like the Switch dock that connects to a Switch but maybe doesn't even need a Switch and can play much more powerful games and is back to plugging into TVs or streaming to a Switch wirelessly. They definitely bought out companies and own companies now that do wireless video streaming, and that is a gimmick certainly to sell on. The Nintendo wireless Switch would be a fine name, and it maybe wouldn't fully imply what a dock could do if it's running way more powerful games. It's fairly crazy though to assume that Nintendo would try to come out with something that competes with an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. And really it would be only competing against the PlayStation 5. Let's see. Let's see if this actually works. But yeah, I would love to see a real effort to try to do something different there and make a powerful console. The question is just how much does Nintendo think it is being hurt by not being able to support AAA, usually mature rated disc-based games or internet download-based games at this point, because It's very possible Nintendo doesn't feel like it's being hurt that much. If they announce a new console, that gives them another excuse to potentially delay Metroid Prime and Prime remakes to that new console. Whereas the art style of most Zelda and Nintendo games, I think, benefit minimally from a way more powerful computer. They could call it the Switch 2K. That wouldn't be a bad name. A Switch 2K that can actually play at 2K resolutions wouldn't be a bad step up, and it might create a nice split in which the need for a Switch 2 or a Switch 2K does feel like it's something just for people who have 2K screens and monitors, and not something that kids feel they absolutely have to have if they're not plugging it into a TV. But yeah, the fact that they won't even commit to backward compatibility at this point shows that they are not ready to lock into anything. Also, they very possibly are not even certain whether they will do backward compatibility. In a lot of ways, that's a nothing story too. It's just like they're not going to say anything until they're ready to say something. Put this here. Activate that. Put that in the graveyard. Activate that. Yeah, with this new Yu-Gi-Oh! Update, they haven't done anything to make this process any faster. I guess for the accountability section, I will say I'm still playing Marvel Snap for no real reason. I'm not playing Project Nikkei, and I'm still playing the Goblin game for no reason, and of course playing Destiny Child, although not focusing in on it well enough to actually succeed well on it. Like, undoubtedly, if I stopped playing Snap and the Goblin game, I could then do a much better job at the events on Destiny Child and focus on that more. But they're all just time waster things, and I'm just trying to waste a lot of time. Alright, well that is as good as we can go. I tried to banish 2 cards here, and they seem unbanishable, so we'll just have to attack them. Moving on with news, Warzone 2's Extraction Mode DMZ is shown off in first gameplay videos if you want to check out that article. Twitter's paid verification leads to fake accounts for game companies, including Nintendo and Valve. Clearly everybody's just like impersonating everybody. Here you have a Mario doing middle finger, Nintendo of us being the real thing. They've taken this down. Elon Musk has taken this down. But the whole thing is a boondoggle. Like, I've been particularly magnanimous, I would say is the right word, as far as Elon Musk hoping that maybe internally he was actually causing better actions to take place, or And you never know, maybe some of the people he brought in are gonna right the ship. But everything that gets reported about his decisions seem like insane, stupid decisions. Getting rid of remote work being one that maybe is a good decision, maybe it's a bad decision, but it's too early of a decision to make, certainly. Unless he really had some kind of evaluation here. There is also, I guess, an interesting argument to make to step back from the whole Twitter debacle at this point and say, well, Elon Musk being allowed to fully buy Twitter and take control over it in the middle of the United States midterm elections seemingly had very little effect on the midterm elections. Way less than, say, gerrymandering and just fake news, I assume, that was going on Facebook, and general just fake news that gets passed around via whispers in the halls of churches and in meeting halls and in the water cooler talk at offices. But yeah, you would think that in the middle of the midterm elections, fake Twitter accounts would be posting all kinds of lies, and yet nobody can point to any of that. All they can point to is a lot of people trolling Elon Musk and trolling other companies. The closest thing that I can even say as a story that I've seen is Eli Lilly was a fake account pretended to be Eli Lilly and announced that all insulin will be free, and then Eli Lilly came back and apologized for the fake account giving out the wrong information, instead of apologizing for the fact that they're charging I think it's like $300 plus for a set of insulin doses, something that costs about $3 to make. And people need to live with, so it should be free. Like, a lot of Elon's actions, had they been done in a more thoughtful way, at a more regular pace, even if Twitter is losing $4 million a day, it's probably losing $4 million a day for years. So, not doing everything so publicly and blowing it up. And noticeably, like, Donald Trump has not come back to Twitter. In reality, people have faked him. Which, if that was the idea, was that this was going to be a way in which Trump gets back on Twitter and gets a lot more viewers, doesn't seem like that worked. Or that Trump wanted to have anything to do with that. Instead, pushing people to his Truth Social website. Moving on with video game news. Google's now processing Stadia refunds ahead of the server's closure. Amazon US is running a 3 for the price of 2 offer on games and other products. Interesting. Let's see, is there a full list of games here? Because this might be something actually might actually be a decent deal. They do point out that the selection isn't as strong as Target's current buy 2 get 1 free option, which 3 for 2 is the same as buy 2 get 1 free. Currently features 689 games, including current and last gen versions of the biggest things like Modern Warfare 2, the Elden Ring, FIFA 23, Lego Star Wars Saga. Amazon Prime Gaming also giving away 7 PC titles. So yeah, there's a thought there. I do have this new Amazon Prime store card, so I could think about possibly getting a couple of games. As almost certainly a better deal than just trying to buy something new from GameStop, and probably a slightly worse deal than getting a good deal on used games at GameStop. Although in all fairness, I have not been inside a physical GameStop in years, and so I don't know if the used discount really is that good for most games. I know it isn't always that good. Often used games are just maybe $5 cheaper than the brand new price of newer games. Let's toss this to start with, and we'll hit this one and this one. This looks like a weird robot stack. Although I am not sure what's going on here. Equip monsters to unequip them to special summon them. It seems like. That seems to be what's going on. Toss that. And then toss that one. And that should give me enough to get it to at least a 3. Nope, straight to a 4. And yeah, there might have been a benefit to do a 3 summon instead. I think if I banish that, that might do something more, but maybe it won't. Just get rid of that effect too. And go. Fully unencumbered to win. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a modder shares a blueprint for a portable Wii/GameCube, which, yeah, it doesn't look that terrible. It's got the GameCube controllers though, so how you would actually play Wii games on this, I don't know. Well, maybe these are IR lights, so you could actually use a Wii Joy-Con with this. Looks interesting in putting the blueprints out there. There has been a lot of design around cutting up a Wii/GameCube circuit board and just like taking an original Wii and GameCube and cutting at certain places to make it much smaller and more portable, which really isn't the way forward. Certainly the way forward would be to build it with modern hardware, regardless of how hard it is to get certain chips at the moment because of the chip shortage. Like, you would want a custom circuit board with custom chips on it. Ideally an FPGA might be the one go with, but maybe not necessarily needed to be an FPGA. fully programmable gate array. When I look at even the GameCube's controllers, let alone the Nintendo 64's controllers, it really just highlights the level of nonsense that some of these button layouts were. Just like a big A button and a small B button, and then an X and a Y button, and then a camera stick that is very much like what a camera right stick is now, and the D-pad and the left stick being exactly the same. So they got 2/3 of the layout right, but they're still kind of experimenting on the button pads, and there still is a level of experimentation with new controllers, but they very often don't seem to be iterating much on that. Even with the GameCube, you can see how Nintendo's desire was to go simpler and simpler and more kid-friendly with a giant A button. And that drastically changed how the game were really made, because there's just less likelihood that you would ever want to press any button other than A. So a fighting game in particular is a great example of something that was not going to be well served with the controller layout of the GameCube, where fighting games want at least 6 buttons that are treated equally, if not 8 buttons that are treated equally. You're not getting anywhere close to that. And yeah, for the amount of effort and work you'd put into this, you probably aren't going to play the GameCube or the Wii that much. This is definitely for the love of the craft of creating something new that you would do a project like that, and it definitely is going to be a very advanced project. The next free Epic games are coming out. Let's see, what are they? I'm getting wrecked here. The games are Evil Dead the game and Dark Deity being free to claim between November 17th and the 24th, which I kind of have forgotten that Evil Dead the game even came out and existed. I don't think I've ever seen or remembered anything about Dark Deity. Dark Deity does look kind of unique in that it is more of a looks like more of a Japanese RPG and more of a flat 2D RPG game, and more of a Japanese game in general, which there's been basically no interest at all, like around Japanese companies selling on the Epic Games Store. For as much as the Epic Games Store is trying to sell itself as a more developer-friendly storefront, I don't believe they have an adult section. I don't think a single adult game has been allowed on there. And just sidestepping adult games, I don't think there's been really any Japanese games or like Japanese feeling games on the Epic Games Store that have been promoted or mentioned. You'd think that there would be some kind of Asian type game that would try to get some kind of exclusivity and say we're going to only be on the Epic Games Store, but they don't seem to be getting those paychecks. This article does give us an interesting number that says last year the Epic Games Store gave away 89 free titles, down from 103 in the year before, for a combined value of $2,120. Users have claimed over 765 million free games, and definitely I have claimed them all, and I have no intention of playing any of them on the Epic Games Store unless Steam just disappears. It is 100%. I'm doing this just as a safety backup in case somehow Valve goes out of business. All the Steam games get removed and stolen from me. Although you do also get a kind of pointless side mention here of the November's free Prime games, being Fallout New Vegas, Ultimate Edition, and these other games, which is not, Amazon and Epic are not connected at all. So if Epic, if Video Games Chronicles wanted to just say this month's free games and just have a single article that they reference and point back to and update, that would be fine, and that would be a nice efficient thing to do. But because of the way that journalism works, you really want the new articles to get more people to look at it. So having a new article and then referencing another article is probably the right thing to do, but boy does it seem like you're just trying to clickbait people. Let's see. There's apparently a photo gallery is what this is. It says a UK artist is creating escapist art with classic arcade machines. I don't know what he really means by that. I don't know if they're saying they took the wood of a classic arcade machine and somehow wrapped this futuristic motorcycle, which I assume this is even real, because this really could be fake. Like, all of these images feel like they are CGI. Yeah. So this would be what I would label as not really news. Danny Passarelli's Fantasy Scene series shows vintage cabinets in unique real-world settings. So, I mean, it's hard to criticize art at all, or say it shouldn't exist or anything like that is stupid, but it just doesn't feel like that this is really video game news. Let's say some artist somewhere happened to use video game arcade cabinets as an inspiration, and then made some images that aren't in any way endorsed or relevant to video games. Just kind of seems like a waste of time. Why can't I trigger the ability? Oh, because I don't have anything in the graveyard. I thought I did. It's popping up a menu now when I hover over a character as far as what's being stacked, which is then changing the menu of what's in your graveyard, which it feels like it should just come in closer if it's going to do that, or it should just not do that at all. Boy, does it seem like something has changed, because just going back to my old Zootropica, whatever the cards are called, deck, all of a sudden started working again in Master Duel. Although, maybe once I get up to the higher levels, it will stop working. It's very possible it's a deck that gets you to the, like, platinum but not diamond level, or to gold 1 and not platinum. Moving on with the news, Battlefield 2042 is coming to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate and EA Play. Free access periods on all platforms are planned for December. Check that article out if you're interested. Doom Eternal fans demand, quote, justice for Mick, following the composer's allegations of mistreatment. It does seem like this hasn't probably blown up as much quite yet as a story, but it very possibly will blow up over the weekend. And yeah, because the composer came with a lot of allegations, 14,000 words in his allegation, which comes off as something that you could easily be sued for if you were lying, or as something that is really just a lot of receipts. That immediately led me to believe that the allegations are probably true. And we haven't heard any real counter argument. This almost certainly now you kind of have to sue the guy, or you're tacitly going to be assumed to be admitting that his allegations are true. I guess we can activate this. Then activate that. Summon this. Face up defense position. And attack. Should be able to now also pull about this one. This will give me a lot of backup options. So we are triggering a whole bunch of stuff. Add that to my hand. Toss that in the graveyard. And in the turn. Unfortunately, I guess there's just not really a lot of more to say on this story. If you haven't followed it, check out the article on Video Games Chronicles until there's some kind of response or some kind of lawsuit that starts. You really just are hearing one person's side of the story, and while it seems believable, you really can't do anything other than demand justice for Mick, which I don't know what that really means or what that would look like. There are definitely, I think, some situations where people think they're supporting a creator by buying a soundtrack for a video game or a movie, and then the actual musicians aren't getting royalties or cuts from that. And generally speaking, there's a lot of chance that buying a CD, soundtrack, or movie is not going to lead to any real money going into the pockets of the artists or creators. Speaking of money not going into artists and creators, YouTube decided to suggest a video that somebody bootlegged of a Weird Al performance on YouTube, and I watched that, and man, there are some Weird Al songs that I do not recognize because I have not listened to any of his CDs since like Running with Scissors, and I think barely I even listened to Running with Scissors, so I am far behind. I suspect Weird Al is pretty old now. So if he can get one or two more CDs out before he needs to retire, I would say good on him, because I suspect even that might be a bit of a struggle. Like, it was maybe a year or two ago that he decided to get rid of all the costumes and jumping around on stage, which that really probably was a lot of his energy and performance, is just changing from costume to costume in nearly every song. And I guess ironically, it shows that Weird Al's best skill may very well be a skill he's developed to change outfits quickly as a quick change artist, more than even playing the accordion or singing or writing parody music. Of course, none of that has anything to do with video games, I'm just talking about it. Netflix Dragon Age Absolution gets a new trailer and a December release date, which, yeah, it looks like an anime-like animation show. I don't think I particularly care enough to watch the trailer here and get the video potentially content ID'd. 6 episodes. And was there another Dragon Age thing? That's the real question, I guess, to ask. I feel like there has been another Dragon Age animated series on Netflix already. But I may be wrong. I think fans of the Dragon Age series do like the story of Dragon Age, but I am not familiar with it, and that's about as much as I can say. Hogwarts Legacy gameplay showcase will take place tomorrow, which it's really late for them to show off gameplay because they really needed to show that earlier. There is also, I think, a concern, a very valid concern about how much this Hogwarts Legacy game will be playable and whether it will just be full of microtransactions. It is very notable that the last big Hogwarts game or Harry Potter game to come out was a mobile game that literally has you run out of energy and need to purchase some more right as your character is being strangled to death by a strangleweed. I think it might be the name of it, but a monster vine. So the pressure was big and the game was not good. So if that's the kind of things that Warner Brothers was allowing, I wouldn't be surprised if Warner Brothers is going to allow a lot of microtransactions or demand a lot of microtransactions, let's just be honest here, and that this will just be another attempt to milk the Harry Potter fans out of money. I don't really have full faith that Harry Potter is going to stand the test of time. I could certainly see it being as popular as like Chronicles of Narnia is right now, which is not to say very popular at all, but I don't think it's going to be a Lord of the Rings type story that has spun a couple of generations. Harry Potter might very well be as popular as like Sherlock Holmes is right now, which is to say not that popular either. Kids don't read books in general, and if they are going to read books, they tend to be shorter than Harry Potter books, and they tend to be kind of all over the place. I think some kids are reading Diary of the Wimpy Kid, and some kids are reading maybe the Series of Unfortunate Events series, and other kids are reading other things. Right. Is that good enough to summon Zeus? Yes, it is. Let's see. The classic UK show Game Master, which never came to the United States, so nobody's ever seen it in the United States, is returning in 2023. This was a cult Channel 4, which even Channel 4 is confusing in the UK because there's a Channel 4, there's a BBC 4, there's Channel 4 / Dave, which, like, I think at some point Channel 4 changed its name to Dave, and yeah, I shouldn't have played that. There's definitely a lot of confusion there. BBC TV tries to make something interesting every now and then, but they make a lot of garbage, and it's always low budget, and they always don't have enough people to be on the shows. There is, I think, also some legal wrangling for BBC channels in which they try a little too hard to have somebody disabled on their shows when they're game shows very often, which gives off the impression that 1 in 4 UK citizens is disabled. Game Master had this like big holographic head, but it was noticeably more around the idea of having kids actually play something that looks like a video game, whereas some shows that were sort of like this in many decades ago in the United States were more like Nickelodeon Double Dare type events instead. There was a a show that did have kids playing video games for high scores in the United States in the old days, but it wasn't particularly well popular. And see, I'm watching more of this trailer. I could see something like Game Master being a lot like The Floor is Lava, just kind of low budget and more for adults than anything else. Game Master full episode. This looks like a new show. You can see they're playing an actual Mario Kart game. Here somebody's in a green screen playing Beat Saber. Here you can see Call of Duty first person shooting. Here you can see some racing. This is 44 minutes of actual gameplay. There's basically one kid here and then presenter adults. Can I not have summoned anything else? I guess maybe not. This kid is playing Splatoon against the more adult, which that is definitely going to be a problem too, is just having a wide split between adults playing and kids playing and adults playing against kids. Yeah. It's kind of like Top Gear in that they have a bunch of people standing around as the crowd audience. And this is obviously no COVID spacing. And it seems like what they're ending here is just with a quiz question and answer to determine whether this guy or this guy is going to win. as far as like video game trivia, which again, that gets away from actual video gaming. Here they have somebody in a robe handing a Game Master trophy to the guy. Somebody put the whole video up. Yeah, there definitely is this theme of people in robes kicking them out, sending them to hell in a box. Just sending him down the lava. Silly. Seriously, how did I just lose there? I would love to know that, but honestly I don't care enough. So I guess I wouldn't love to know it, come to think of it. And so this old hologram head that they're showing in the Game Master is like the presenter Game Master from the original series decades ago. He's probably either very old or dead at this point. And so I imagine they're just using old footage and holographing it up even more so that it seems like it would make sense that it's as blurry as it is, or as low resolution as it is. And yeah, inevitably it probably will get a bump around the Taskmaster series of shows, just by having Master in the name. So it's not a bad idea to bring Game Master back. Yeah, this almost certainly is footage of him from the original Game Master series, and they've just added a bunch of hologram effects to make it... I think it was a hologram originally, but they probably added more effects to make it more pixely, because this would have been a less than 720p image, I imagine. Or at best 720p. No, it'd probably be closer to 480i. Netflix just released a new trailer for its live-action Witcher prequel series. The Witcher Blood Origin will hit the streaming platform on Christmas Day. Which, as far as a Witcher prequel series, you'd kind of expect there to be a Witcher prequel book that does this referencing, or a Witcher prequel video game. As far as fans of the Witcher game, we would like a prequel video game more than anything. And I guess this is maybe a slight hint that if Netflix does this prequel TV series and it succeeds, that maybe the next Witcher series would be a prequel series. I think that works as well as anything else. Modern Warfare 2 is already close to topping Vanguard's lifetime sales in Europe, according to Video Games Chronicles. Nintendo emphasizes the importance of Nintendo accounts for its next-gen consoles. The company wants to connect its consoles to other areas of its business. Let's see. Nintendo accounts, introduced in 2016, is a means of unifying the user experience between Nintendo mobile games, online stores, and consoles. Yeah, I definitely don't expect that Nintendo accounts will go anywhere, but that does give a hint that whatever the next Nintendo console is will almost certainly require an account of some sort. Xbox 360 required you to make at least an Xbox Live free account to do anything. I'm fairly certain PlayStation requires you to make at least a free PlayStation Network account. So I don't think there is a single console out there that doesn't require an account. Cell phones integrate it very nicely, but you definitely are connecting a Google account if you install anything from Google Play, or a Twitter account if you're installing the game and using Twitter logins instead, or Facebook accounts. iOS, I'm sure, connects an iOS Apple ID to it. Remedy has confirmed that Control 2 is in development for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. It's kind of interesting that they're locking into committing for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, but I wouldn't be surprised if they actually opt to skip that and actually release it on a PlayStation 6 or whatever the next Xbox is going to be, which maybe it's going to be XSXX. Although by the time the next Xbox comes out, somebody else may be in charge of naming it, so maybe it'll have a more reasonable thing. I assume Control 2 is going to integrate Alan Wake a little bit more, but mostly just be the exact same game with the exact same character, and I wouldn't expect much else. At a certain point, if they get to Control 3 or 4, they may run out of ideas that they can steal from the SCP website, and at that point they may have to try to write their own stories, or like Control 1 story may have been actually original, but it definitely was heavily influenced by SCP. The entire story and theming is. And yeah, I definitely am not interested in playing a Control 2. I didn't like the way Control 1 controlled, ironically, and I didn't like the repetitive nature and gameplay mechanic of it for the story it was really telling. It would have been a lot better, in my opinion, if it had bespoke linear levels throughout the entire game, and you had some other characters with you that were talking to you and fighting with you, more like a team-based squad first-person shooter instead of a single person first-person shooter, because you were just taking on too many waves of enemies for it to feel legitimate that one person would be able to beat them all. Or you could have gone the other direction instead of making it like a Gears of War game, which is what I'm thinking about, and you could have made it more like a horror game, which that probably is a smarter move, is to make it more like Resident Evil 4 and much more horrific and spooky. But people have tried to do that with like The Evil Within and didn't work that well. There just was definitely something off with Control that lost my interest. Moving on, some God of War Ragnarok Collector's Editions shipped without the game. Users also reported the 200 edition arriving without the Steelbook display case. So people are getting screwed. Which, yeah, that sucks. I imagine that happens for most limited editions in the small numbers, but for it to happen even to one person is ridiculously unacceptable. It's not hard, I imagine, to weigh a package right as you're boxing it up and shipping it out, and if you're not automatically having the boxes roll onto a weighing machine on a conveyor belt, then you are just not optimizing your production and your setup well, because you have to weigh it to stamp it for postage too. So it should have been noticeably lighter if it was missing a steelbook. It probably should be noticeably lighter if it's missing 2 DVD Blu-ray discs. Now, in fairness, I will say Legos, with the tiny Legos, they weigh all their Lego pieces at high precision, and even at that, they still know there's a small chance that they won't get the right numbers, and that's why Legos always puts at least one extra piece. Although, I'm not sure how much of that actually has to do with weight as it does with just giving an extra piece, so if you drop a piece and lose it, you don't have to go through the process of trying to get a replacement piece for all their 1x1 small pieces. they give you an extra piece. They don't give you an extra piece of every kind of piece, every kind of brick. But yeah, that's just bad production. But at a certain level, that's barely even video games' fault, because these limited edition products are ridiculous add-ons done by shipping and fulfillment companies, not video game developers. Let's see. Moving on, the Battlefield Mobile Open Beta is launched in some regions. New gameplay published as testing enters its latest phase. Check out that article if you're interested. The PUBG owner Krafton has acquired the Ascent developer Neon Giant. A Swedish studio's second game will be an open-world first-person shooter. Okay. The Ascent, I recognize the name of this game, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. Microsoft Flight Simulator's 40th anniversary updates adds helicopters and gliders. I would love to own Flight Simulator, but I almost certainly would never actually play it. I think Flight Simulator, the newest Flight Simulator game, does have a decent little story tutorial mode to learn how to fly in the simulator game, not fly in real life, I'm sure. But I think you fairly quickly break out of that and are just going to have to find your own enjoyment in simulating flying. God of War Ragnarok sales have broken the franchise launch record in the UK. Day 1 physical sales topped the series' previous 1-week record. Okay, so yeah, God of War Ragnarok selling well, and I haven't heard anything bad about it, so I assume it's a pretty good game. So far, I have to assume that. And then the Batman voice actor Kevin Conroy died at age 66, which again is fairly young. The actor voiced the DC characters in Batman the Animated Series and numerous games. But Batman is dead in Gotham Knights, and seems like he actually is dead in Gotham Knights. Like, there was no big twist to say Batman actually came back. He was in Batman Arkham and the Injustice series, which that certainly puts a whole different wrapping on this. At age 66, he looks fairly rough. If this was 66. Let's see. He's been ill for a while, but he really put a lot of time at the cons to the joy of his fans. He'll be sorely missed. So yeah, there's a wastiness to his appearance here that you can retroactively assume, and so he had some disease, and I assume in this case it probably isn't COVID, because if it was COVID, you die too quickly to really have a wasting disease. It might be long-term COVID, but it also might be just psoriasis of the liver, or AIDS, or cancer, or any number of even rarer diseases. And yeah, you never get the answers as far as what the actual diagnosis is. I guess maybe people other than me just don't care. This does create a nice split for DC and Warner Brothers, as they are being bought out by a new company and making changes. It lets them get a new voice actor potentially for a new Batman series, which they almost certainly will have to do for a new video game series of Batman, or will want to do. Obviously they'll have to do it. They can't bring Kevin Conroy back, although maybe they could with AI voice generation. Moving on to the Gemetsu articles, as we'll try to burn through these quickly. Sports Story launches in December. The Golf Story game, I believe, is kind of free on Switch at the moment. You might want to check that out. I may be saying the wrong thing there, and wrong. But it does seem like Golf Story and Sports Stories are Switch exclusives. The Rumblefish 2 has a character trailer if you want to check that out on Gematsu. A Chinese open world action game called Project the Perceiver has been announced for multiple platforms, including the PS4 and PS5. Although I don't know why you would say multiple platforms and not just list them on Gamatsu, since they love to list everything else. Maybe the exact phrasing is multiple platforms, because they haven't announced them, or it could be that this is what they mean by multiple platforms, since this is a Chinese game, is that there might be 2 or 3 different line games type platforms where you can play games. Line is more of a Japanese app, but there might be a Chinese one, or they might be using Line too. There's a few Asian platforms out there that I know exist but couldn't really name. A game called The Tower to the Bottom has a Switch version and is also delayed to January 19th, 2023. This is maybe the beginning of seeing a lot of Japanese games start to add the delays that they love to do. A game called Majorca Real Estate 2, The Mystery of New Property, has been announced for Switch, and it's now available. It looks like it is kind of a real estate Tetris game? Is that what it is? I see Tetris-like shapes, and then I see a bunch of what look like mini games there. Yeah, it's almost like a Sudoku puzzle game, I think, more than anything. Yeah, I don't know if there's more to it than this, or if this is just a really simplistic game. There is some implication of like folding space and maybe seeing a 3D environment like this more often, but they really are just teasing that, so that might be like the very final level. A language deciphering game, 7 Days to End with You, is coming to Switch this winter. It includes exclusive new features and new endings. It is first launched on the iOS and Google Play App Store on January 24th, and it was launched on Steam February 6th, so let's see what's happening here. This game is very positive. It's not visually good looking, but you know what? I'm gonna give it a follow, or just go ahead and put it on the wish list. There does seem to just be enough of a following here to justify it. Like, very, very positive. And this might be a great example of, yeah, you don't have to be the greatest animator to make a game that's slightly interesting. Like, this definitely looks like a game that could have been released 10 years ago, and it would have run on PCs 10 years ago. And it definitely comes off a lot like a visual novel, and I guess technically it is a visual novel, but it's adding that extra element. Now, noticeably, I definitely would not want to play every visual novel in the world that I might want to play with an extra game mechanic of having to decipher what is being said. That would be a waste of time. But doing it once as a gimmick is not terrible. Samurai Maiden has a Hagane trailer, which I assume Hagane is this character, this anime waifu character with metal arm, which you have to really focus to even see it because it's so dark compared to a lot of brightness and colorfulness elsewhere on the screen. Japanese language, as I understand it, mostly likes to be pronounced in couples, so ha, ga, ne is how you'd pronounce that, not again, or which would be more how you'd pronounce it in English, or Hagen. The next Ys game is going to launch for the PS4, PS5, Switch on September 30th in 2023 in Japan. Yeah. Moving on, Gamatsu says Steel Rising's DLC Callisto Secrets is now available. Which I say this way too often, but I didn't even know Steel Rising had come out. There is a major problem of games coming out and then all coverage just disappearing on them. And at a certain point, if I stop hearing about a game, I should just assume it has come out. And that's why I spend so much time looking at every single game coming out on Steam, so I actually have an idea whether a game has come out or not. And yeah, your mileage varies greatly on whether that's worth the time or not. For most people, it's probably not worth the time. Monster Hunter Rising Sunbreak has a free title update and 3 digital events set for November 16th. We Were Here Forever for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series launches on January 31st of 2023. It's currently available for PC on Steam. This is another game that seemingly I missed for some reason. This one I believe I may have skipped intentionally though because it's co-op only. Yeah, it's an online co-op game, part of the We Were Here series of puzzle games that require co-op. And it's a shame because I really would like to play these games, but I'm never going to have anybody co-op to play them with. Undoubtedly, that would help me create a lot of content if I did have just a partner / co-op player in gaming. And I imagine even people with friends and girlfriends and wives still have major struggles to get into gaming co-op in any consistent level, and that does become this weirdness around how many co-op games get made. If you are a game developer and you think your game should be co-op, it probably highlights that you're not in touch with what an actual gamer's life is. You're one of the lucky few that either has somebody to play co-op with you, or you just don't play games at all, so you don't know what gamers really are doing with their time. Let's see, moving on. Cuddly Forest Friends launches February 2nd on the West, which looks cutesy as a game. Looks like it's probably a kid's game. Might be close to like a Hey You Pikachu game. Is it coming to any consoles, or it's coming to the Switch? Interesting. Famitsu sales have been updated for the week of 10/31 to 11/6, which Harvestelia for the Nintendo Switch took the second spot, and Nintendo Switch in general takes all top 8 spots. Doraemon Season of the Seasons taking the 3rd spot. That's actually a little surprising for the Nintendo Switch. And then Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 takes the 9th slot for PS4, and Star Ocean Divine Force taking the 11th spot for PS4. Call of Duty PS5 jumping down, I think, quite a bit. I think it very possibly was in the 2nd spot last week. Now Call of Duty for the PS5 is, where is it? In the 14th spot. Then Gran Turismo in the 18th spot, being beaten out by a Japanese Switch game, Amina de Rhythm Party. And then hardware sales has tons of OLED models and regular Switch models taking the top 2 spots again, with the PlayStation 5 selling slightly less than the original Switch did this week, but still selling way better than it has been selling. The Xbox Series X then 10,000 units less in the 4th spot, which top 3 for this week matter, and then the rest don't. uh, Xbox Series X beating the Switch Lite. Maybe it's some small hint, but the fact that the PS5 digital version is so few, and Xbox Series X is so few, and PlayStation 4 is so few, or the new 2DS LL is so few, seems kind of irrelevant numbers. It almost seems like for every single spot that there would have been an Xbox Series X in a store in Japan, it was just holding space until PlayStation 5s got in stock, because that is seemingly exactly what they did, is that they just said remove all the PlayStation X's, don't order anymore, and sell PlayStation 5s instead now that we can get them. Which that may also highlight just the incredible level of loyalty that Japanese people have to Japanese companies, in that they would buy a Sony PlayStation and recognize Sony PlayStation as something they want. So as soon as it was on the shelf, way more than the Microsoft Series X, which there's very little interest for. Moving on, the cyberpunk roguelike action-adventure game called Arc Runner has been announced for everything except for the Switch, it looks like. It's due out in 2023. We've got some screenshots here, but it mostly looks like corridors and backgrounds. And so that's not really showing me enough to really think anything about the game, other than, yeah, there's somewhat pretty corridors and backgrounds, but that doesn't mean anything. Rune Factory 3 has a special opening movie if you want to check this out on Gamatsu. Rune Factory, I guess, on top of being an action RPG, might be a farming game, considering how much food is around this character. A multiplayer third-person mech shooter called War of Robots Frontiers has been announced for everything except for the Switch. Well, interestingly, this is also including the Xbox One, where most games nowadays are not including the Xbox One, even if they are including the PlayStation 4. Jagex has announced 3 games publishing partnerships with Snow Castle Games. This includes the Ikone Island and Earthblock Adventure and Earthlock 2. I don't know either one of those games. Let's see. Coney Island is a farming action RPG game, which honestly there's just a lot of these. So this game is going to come out of early access. It is rated very positively, but at a certain point now, I think I am just going to actively try to avoid anything that has survivalist farming elements in it, unless it's the cream of the crop. Because those are just not the kinds of games I want to play. Void Terrarium 2 launches February 28th in North America and March 3rd in Europe, according to Gamatsu, which I'm not sure I ever figured out what Void Terrarium is as a game. Looks like, I guess it's a top-down hack and slash, for lack of a better term. Wouldn't have guessed that. Forspoken has yet another deep dive exploring Athea, a trailer if you want to check that out. It is really a catch-22, because I've complained about Forspoken not really showing me anything, and now that they're starting to slowly put out these trailers to show things, I'm not really interested in looking at them, because it just grabbed my attention much. Part of the problem, I'll say, is you look at this character in this cloak, and this is just all blackness. This is not anywhere close to like the distinctive appearance of 2B in Nier Automata, where I'm not saying everybody needs to be in like sexy nighty clothes and showing off a big butt, but there needs to be something to see here visually. Put a big symbol on the back of the cloak, put some more designs, something I can see, something that would be helpful. Even do the dead space thing where you can look at the back and see health and things like that. You're probably going to spend a lot of time looking at the back of these characters. Give them some hair, give them some humanity so you can see them. Put something on the arms more to focus on that. She's basically completely covered up, and it's just not visually appealing. And if you're not gonna show the character who you're supposed to like, then add another character that you will show. Like, this is interesting somewhat to look at. It's also kind of a visual mess with a lot going on, but it's at least something. Like, it's just so plain. Yeah, give her a glowing gold coat if you want to do that, and have it shimmer with magic. Plain real world shoes, like, that's fine if you're going to keep those plain real world shoes, but maybe get rid of them. As an interesting thought, has there ever been a game where a character intentionally takes off their shoes and then there's just a foot fetish around the character the whole time? I bet not, because nobody can animate feet any particularly well. But yeah, as a character, she's not visually appealing in the way they're displaying her, and that's a character you're gonna have to look at. And she's not colorful, and it doesn't have to all just be lewd. It could just be do something. Mario is blue overalls and red shirt and a red hat. When you look at the back of Mario in most games, you recognize him. He sticks out on the screen. He is noticeable and iconic at this point. It feels like they are potentially just trying to burqa the character, and maybe that should be a new phrase, is burqaing someone or hijabing somebody. I would want to figure out the exact phrase I'm looking for, because I'm not just talking about a hijab. I'm talking about the ones in Saudi Arabia where it is just not an inch of skin can be shown, and they have just this cloth all over their heads and all dragging on the ground. And yeah, I'd have to do some research to remember what the name of that is. But yeah, they seem to just want to have a female empowered character, but they also don't want anybody to possibly find the female empowered character attractive or dressed in any attractive way. And that has been a problem with some levels of feminists and some feminists in general, is that women attacking other women because those women decided to dress in a more provocative, sexy way. And so, yeah, that's something that feminism has had to focus on and struggle with, is to say, no, if you're a feminist, you have to support every woman's right to dress the way they want to, as far as their body and their choice. Neptunia Sisters vs. Sisters launches January 24th, 2023. I think I've been saying Moeiro Chronicles, and I was thinking of Neptunia as far as a Darkest Dungeon potential competitor. Of course, Darkest Dungeon visuals are way different than Neptunia visuals. That being said, the gameplay is not really that much different, as far as just being RPG games where you're going to grind quite a bit. And I imagine there probably are more fans of the Neptunia series, which is a much longer running series than Darkest Dungeon, although Darkest Dungeon 2 is coming out to apparently no announcement. but a comparison certainly is each of these Neptunia characters, even these new sister characters that are new to the series, have names, have personalities, have characterization, whereas in Darkest Dungeon there is the Ancestor who doesn't have a name, and then there is nobody else. Like, there are some bad guy sub-bosses that are talked about and have names, I guess, and that's it. Moving on, Megaton Musashi X has been delayed to December 8th in Japan. Utawaru Reiru Mono Special Broadcast 2022 is set for November 25th. It's an announcement on, I guess it's a smartphone JRPG. It says it's PC, PS5, PS4, and smartphones. Dragon Quest Treasures has a full Japanese cast announced. Check out this article on Gamatsu if you're interested. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim 3rd Anniversary Celebration livestream is set for November 28th. Again, an announcement for an announcement. Almost done with the Gamatsu articles. Gungrave Gore has an overview trailer if you want to check that out. Control 2 being announced. I guess. Maybe there's something you're supposed to take from this picture. The thing that might be most interesting about this is it seems like this room is opening up and showing the outside of the oldest building, and that you might actually leave the oldest building in Control, which is something that probably should happen, but it also will be weird. I think the building was called the oldest building. Crafton acquires Neon Giant. We already talked about that too. Alright, so now we're looking at games on Steam. This probably is an asset flip horror game and doesn't have anything to catch my attention otherwise. We immediately are going into an adult game called Going Rogue, which is 3D CGI images. Although, interestingly, there is a screenshot here of a lady that is fully clothed in a hoodie with a knife coming towards the screen. And yeah, I really cannot encourage knife play. And then there's another screenshot here with a lady with a revolver, and I really can't encourage gunplay. If you are going to have props in sex activities, they need to be toy props. They could never have a bullet in it, could never have a sharp blade, and even at that's going to probably break the fantasy for most people. And really, I think people that would want a real gun involved or a real knife involved probably need to seek out therapy somewhat to separate the difference between fantasies, which are all fine and good, and acting out fantasies, which is often very, very dangerous. Going Rogue is $11.04, English only, and yeah, it does not look particularly much like anything that is special, other than there is just this odd level of violence that's being depicted on top of it. There's another picture where two guys are fighting in a bar and the guy's about to smash a bottle over the guy's head. These are just asset flip 3D models. And yeah, it still is just technically a visual novel, but not really showing any text on screen in any of the screenshots. So yeah, that's, I guess, one realistic animation depiction. I did find on Facebook a character height sheet comparison of the Sailor Moon characters, which is kind of what I'd like to have as far as comparing different art styles. But the problem there is it's just the Sailor Moon characters all in the kind of unique art style of the Sailor Moon characters, whether you're talking about the original animation of the Sailor Moon characters in the manga or the original anime or the new anime Sailor Moon Crystal, but each of those are kind of unique. This next adult game on Steam is called Lovelorn Sanatorium, which I guess is YouTube family friendly. It's going for the more flatter animation style instead of the 3D animation style, and kind of anime inspired, but not really. Definitely not going for the moe style, and I don't want to just claim everything is anime just because it's flat 2D. But yeah, you still are seeing the big eyes, so I would say this is anime inspired as much as almost everything is. It's $7.19. It's English with Chinese full audio and Japanese full audio. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a Chinese game. Let's see, next. Wow, we must have some bundling going on because 3 adult games in a row really should not happen. Next we have a game called Muse, Valkyrie, and Dungeon, which is flat 2D women being groped by a demon. And it's more of a kind of groping minigame, which we don't see too many of those like sex simulator groping minigames happening here. And the animation style is definitely not anime inspired this time. I'd say it is definitely trying for more of a Western style. The eyes are much more realistic size. The head is much more realistic size. These are mature, tall looking characters. Weirdly, I think the actual gameplay in this is a side-scrolling shooter because there's 3 screenshots at the end in which you're side-scrolling shooting, which makes no sense because before that there are 2 screenshots of a groping minigames, which I guess is just a minigame. So it describes itself as a combination third-person and first-person shooter game. So basically it's a bad game with adult content added for $3.99. It is English full audio and then Chinese subtitles. So maybe it's a cheap Chinese game, but honestly, I would be happy to say this is actually just a cheap kind of attempt at an asset flip side-scrolling shooter that they knew wouldn't sell, so they threw in the adult content. And I can't really complain too much about that happening, really. It almost makes sense if you are going to make a garbage game to try to add something else that would be appealing, whether it's adult content or something else. This Atari 50th Anniversary Collection is one to consider. It is worth mentioning, though, that like Atari has been bought out, so this is just really a collection of ROMs that's being put on sale. They were working on this other Atari console that almost certainly is never actually coming out. And it's worth pointing out Atari games are first generation games. They are incredibly old. They're not really games you're likely to want to play. I'm actually even a little shocked to see something that looks like it has any 3D graphics at all under an Atari brand. But yeah, there's a potential level of relevancy here, and there's some positive reviews. Your mileage is going to vary drastically, certainly, whether you've played Atari games before or not. If you played them before when you were a kid and you have nostalgia there, I think you have some chance of liking Atari games. If you've never played them before, there's no reason to really play them. Even from a historical perspective, there's really not. Here we have My Girlfriend is a Futanari, which means dick girl again. And this is like the third game, I think, from this specific developer and publisher, just asset flipping images of the idea of dick girls and not really making a good product. Although it seems like it must be working for him, or he thinks it's gonna work for him. Like, the backgrounds are awful, the story I imagine is awful. There's only one character being shown at all. It may be an under-addressed niche, and it is only selling for 66 cents, English only, so that may be where it is. And see, I guess you would say this is a cartoon animation style, more Western realistic animation style, 2D realistic, because you don't have the big eyes. And while it is colorful, I'm not going to just say everything colorful is anime. And next we have yet another adult game called Corruption Ranch, which is a horribly, like, MS Paint level graphics, I would say, animated furry monster game. Does seem like it might be a little bit more of a game in that it's trying to be a colony sim, but then just like every user interface has boobs or nudity on it, but none of the animation, even the adult animation, looks good. It looks totally like garbage. And I would say, again, this is a flat, almost color pencil, I'd say flat color pencil, realistic art style, 2D realistic. We have to assume that there's just bundling here. Like, there's no way you would have 5 adult games all come out on Friday without the same old tricks being pulled. So any concern, like, this new bit of evidence, this new data point, eliminates any concern that I might have been wrong that adult games were coming out all the time at random intervals like every other game. No, there is definitely some bundling. There's definitely some level of pre-approval that happens to have adult games on the Steam store, and they only approve it seemingly every couple of weeks on Fridays in at least a vast majority of adult games, maybe not all of them. It does seem intentional to wait till late in the Friday evening or a Friday in general to release a game so that they wouldn't get any press. Not that they would get any press anyways, but it does definitely feel like they are pushing their thumbs on the scales of fairness to hurt adult games and the chance of adult games being seen, being purchased, which is counter logical to what they should be doing, considering how some of the most successful games on Steam are adult games, despite interference from Valve themselves. And maybe that is the truth that Valve just doesn't want people to see or to admit, is that there are a lot more perverts out there than who are willing to admit they're perverts out loud on a YouTube channel, and they do buy these games, and there is a demand for it. It really is kind of a great example of how the idea of supply and demand is just not, it's just not that simple, and it's just not accurate. Like, the supply doesn't always go up. In fact, very rarely goes up because of demand, and demand does not create supply, particularly ever. Archipelago. I don't think there's quite enough here for me to put this on the follow list. I made a bunch of YouTube shorts, but I didn't schedule them. I was going to go ahead and pull the trigger and start scheduling like 2 at a time, overlapping. The YouTube shorts that are getting views, I'll give this a chance, although it doesn't need a YouTube short, I think. The YouTube shorts that are being suggested to me are getting decent views, but it also seems like those may be older ones, so there might be a bit of a slow burn, as it were, as far as how long it takes a YouTube short to start to get views and start to be suggested. Valkyrie Elysium here is being rated mostly positive at 74%. That's not the highest numbers, so I'll give that a YouTube short and put it on the follow list. Although I really question whether I would ever really want to play a Square Enix JRPG, particularly, and if I was going to play one of those, it really would be weird to not play Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy XIII Exorcist Story. Yeah. Generally, I'm just going to curate out any RPG Maker looking game that looks like this, that may have some story to it. It is an odd counter offer, certainly, to potentially make a visual novel, but say I can't make a visual novel, so I'm going to waste a lot of the player's time using RPG Maker and have people wandering around doing RPG Maker elements in their game for no reason. In fairness, I've only played like Always Sometimes Monsters, but that is a prime example of what I think a lot of these games are, is that they want to tell a story, but they can't animate things, so they're going to make you live the story through a mechanic system of RPG elements that just don't make sense at all. Link the Cubes. It's a puzzle game. I'll give it a chance. One of the things I did when I made the YouTube shorts, though, is I also reloaded the pages and only picked the ones that that actually were getting some reviews and were reviewed well. And so I was able to do, after even just a couple of days, quite a bit of curation. And for the games that really didn't get any follows, I left them, but I will have to eventually get rid of them too. Tactics Ogre Reborn is another Square Enix game. I think these games very possibly are older Square Enix games coming to PC, which that's not a terrible idea. Here we have another adult game. At least it's somewhat separated out. Fairy Girl. Let's see if any of these screenshots are YouTube family unfriendly. I would say not really. So yes, the eyes are big, so I guess technically you might, if it were eyes alone that were the factor, you might call this thing a 2D, unrealistic 2D anime style. But on the other hand, I would say this is probably more European in its animation. That the breasts are just too big, the hip is too narrow. It's anime inspired, but not really anime. It's 84 cents. You can see that the languages above the fold are English, French, German, Spanish, Portuguese. It's not until below the fold that you even see Korean or Japanese as a language. Steam did say that they've added a this is obviously just a jigsaw puzzle game too, so there's nothing else to say there. They've said they've added more features to their search, so you can search in different languages for games. I don't think that inherently added any languages to the languages that a game can say it supports, though, because I think all those languages had already been covered. At least that was my understanding of just skimming the update, is that now if you go into a search bar and you started to type something, it probably, if you type something into a different language, would translate it to a game that would match, which is somewhat impressive for all the different languages out there to have a search engine that it could say translate every single word and try to find matches. Although the results are fairly limited on Steam compared to like Google searching the entire internet, so anything you do to potentially add more to page 100 of a search result benefits very few people, but if you're searching a long phrase or something that only comes up with 1 or 2 results, translating that into different languages might work. This looks like this is a Tetris math game of some sort. I'll give this a chance. Depends if you like math games, certainly, as to whether you want to engage with that. Here we have a Western visual novel. Boys love visual novel 15 plus with anime style. Yeah. And yeah, what do they think anime style is? Is it because the eyes are big, or is it because it's just bright colors? I kind of don't call this anime style at all. I call this more of a Central European animation style. Something you would expect in something like the Brothers Grimm tales. We need better styles, and perhaps we need to name more styles based on artist. Here we have much more noticeable moe style, at least, of shorter characters, really big eyes, really big head. They're in school outfits, but I don't think this game is labeled as having any mature content. Let's see. Violence and profanity, so it's allowed. Japanese full audio. I wouldn't be surprised if there might be an adult patch somewhere for this game. This needs a follow, just in case it turns out to be a actually popular visual novel series. Colorful is a tag, I suppose. Do I do a YouTube short on something like this, though? I should try. I should try at least one anime-looking visual novel YouTube short and see if it catches anybody's attention. For the vast majority, as I'm getting further and further pushed into actually engaging with YouTube shorts, most of the things I'm clicking at are either confusion creating or clickbaity. I clicked on some Codes YouTube short where it was like the best programming IDE to use in 2023, and it turned out to be a joke troll that Microsoft Word was the best IDE to use, which Microsoft Word is not a programming IDE at all. So I found that amusing but not informative, and generally in programming videos, if I am going to watch them, I would want to be informed. Let me just make sure this is YouTube family friendly. Yeah. So here we have a game called Gore Screaming Show, and definitely you have a almost chibi moe anime girl here next to a monstrous gory thing here. You have characters in school outfits. So this is from Jast as the publisher. It's $26.99. Japanese full audio. Let's see what the mature content is on here. Let's see. Psychological horror, violence, blood, death, arson, tobacco use, also one scary clown monster. Okay, so this might give us an interesting perspective on just how gory and bloody a game can be in this animation style, which maybe Valve doesn't care about that at all, but maybe Valve does. There is a certain question about like YouTube shorts. Even would I want to do a YouTube short? I think for the safety of my channel I have to say no. This one is going to be one that I shouldn't make a YouTube short on, but I will give it a follow. And that's it. Surprisingly large amount of adult games, not much of anything else. We are getting really, really close to Black Friday, so I just have to at this point expect that there won't be much more announcements of new games or new games for Black Friday. It's a little too late to announce or release anything. I guess God of War Ragnarok is gonna just win it. Let's see. We already talked about this, but GameDeveloper.com has an article talking about how FIFA has 4 blockchain-based game/apps in development for the Qatar 2022 FIFA game, soccer game. So, very disappointing, but pretty much expected from FIFA. Riot Games is going to self-publish a League of Legends and Teamfight Tactics in the Southeast Asia, which, okay. Riot Games is owned by, I think, NetEase. So, self-publishing under their own name is a little different, but not that different. If Riot Games isn't owned by NetEase, it's owned by Tencent. So, I'm fairly certain League of Legends is owned by a Chinese company. Riot Games' lawsuit against mobile developer Moonton has been dismissed in court, which I don't remember this lawsuit at all. It was dismissed in a California court earlier this week. The dismiss follows Moonton's motion to have the case moved to another court to better suit the case, which in this instance would be in China. This is the second time Riot Games has had the case dismissed over a change of venue. In 2017, the League of Legends developer took Moonton to court after it believed the latter developer made a Magic Rush Heroes, an allegedly blatant mobile clone of its flagship game. Yeah, right? Owned by Tencent. Which is probably why it's not succeeding so well in California courts, or succeeding so well in United States courts at all, is that there might very well be some legal jingoism / protectionism going on. And you know what? I can't really even blame the United States court system for not backing a Chinese company, considering how many copyright things are just blatantly stolen in China all the time. Like, turnabout is fair play, I guess, if nobody's going to play fair. Although, at a certain point, an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind too, so that really shouldn't be how the court system works. But it's also very possible Moonton has done nothing wrong. Like, I don't remember this story at all. I probably ignored it because I don't care about League of Legends. It's not video game related, but a Texas federal judge also blocked the Joe Biden presidency's student loan forgiveness program, which is going to see it either taken up by the Supreme Court in appeal or not taken up by the Supreme Court. And I guess if it's not taken up by the Supreme Court, it would then potentially stand, but it would create a weirdness in that the Supreme Court has already not taken up 2 of the other things. Yeah, but yeah, there are definitely lawsuits, and for lack of a better term, I think people would describe some judges as activist judges on the right, who are fighting anything Biden wants to do, even simple things like forgiving federal student loans and helping the economy, or helping people who are being crushed by student loans. Moving on, back to video game news. Jagex signs 3 game publishing deal with Snowcastle Games. We already talked about that. The obituary of Kevin Conroy. Could we possibly... Yeah, it doesn't seem like we're gonna probably get any information more here. There really isn't no way, if I can throw out an opinion here, that you should be this skinny and this just stricken if you're a voice actor or actor. Like, this is a lack of muscle tone and a lack of fat that you just should not have. Somebody who potentially was working in a field or in the depression and starving to death would look like that, not somebody who's well paid and well fed. You can even see here in this headshot, which was probably done much earlier, that there's just a lot more muscle and fat on this face, particularly around the jawline, compared to here where it's just wasting away on the neckline and the jawline and cheekbones. Hair seems to be receding somewhat, but it seems like it was already doing that. Yep. So yeah, definitely some kind of long-term wasting happened there. Moving on, Crafton acquires the Ascent developer Neon Giant. Man, almost every game developer article here is not new. And then Improbable announces a December shutdown date for Scavengers. I have never heard of a game called Scavengers, so it must have not been that popular. And I'll leave that GameDeveloper.com article for you to read if you're interested. And then Marvel Contest of Champions developer Kaboom has laid off 7% of its staff, which I guess anything more than 1% is probably notable. A lot of these businesses and game companies don't have a lot of people, so 7% of your staff might be quite a few people. That being said, I don't even recognize Contest of Champions. It's just yet another Marvel game. I wouldn't be surprised if this is what will happen at Second Dinner, even after Marvel Snap loses its main fan base. I hope it doesn't go that way for any company, Second Dinner specifically, but I could also see Marvel Snap just not really supporting them long enough to make another game, which they haven't really announced that another game is even in development yet. Right. And then we've got some YouTube follow list games. This game, The Dreamcatcher, is some kind of psychological horror game. It's mostly positive. I think I'll put it on the wish list. Although in all fairness, this could just be a asset flip garbage game. I guess maybe the one thing unique here is the idea of a Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatchers just don't show up in games or media very much. That's a unique thing. Light Warriors, I guess I'll give more time to, but I'm probably going to say no to this eventually. We should be right at the end next week of my follow list, and I am fairly certain I didn't program it in any way to go around and wrap around to the A's. So I'm still just waiting for my program to crash. I'm going to say no to this because this just looks like a Chinese RPG game, and thematically being Chinese is kind of interesting, but I don't think it's interesting enough. Eventually there will be a thematic, like, Chinese themed game in feudal Chinese environments and stories that will be very popular, and then I'll play that game. And until then, I'm still just waiting for them to get better at making games, Chinese developers to get better at making games. Trace of Time. Is this a VR game? No, it's early access from 2000, so I'm gonna remove it from the follow list. Yeah, it's just never gonna be finished at this rate. A Tetris game called Block Fight with some other elements there where you're using the Tetris pieces to make walls and do a tower defense. It's an interesting idea. And certainly this is a great example. As much as I may poop on garbage Chinese games, this is an example of Chinese developers doing something different because they're not constricted to certain ways of thinking yet. Taking a concept of a tower defense and a Tetris game and merging it together. Unless, of course, they stole that idea from somebody, but if they did steal that idea from somebody, I don't know who, so I'll have to assume it's original. Go back to hell. Do I want to say yes to this and make an exception? Or do I want to give it more time? It's been a year. I think I will just make an exception and say yes to it. It's still, every time I deal with this fall list and master list, it's just getting kind of more and more ridiculous, though, because I just am not buying any games at all this year. This is early access, so I'll take this off. And it looks like this game is just going to be too irrelevant. So, and early access, so I'll take that off the fall list. Full motion video, mostly positive. Yep. We'll put that on the wish list. Then one more game to check. Bloody Spell. Is this an MMORPG? No, it says single player with online co-op. It's rated very positively. It's also an adult game with sexual content and nudity, apparently. So maybe that is why it's positively. Although, it's not in the adult section, so maybe there's very little of that. Let's see. Equipped with a cool apron or zombie role-playing in the jewelry bar, the character's appearance will change to a girl and there will be more exposed parts. So you can change the character into a scantily clad character. Then, yeah. They're selling just a massive amount of DLC to change the character's appearance. This puts you in a weird position, certainly, because do you want to play this game because you want to play this game, or do you want to play this game because there's DLC that can make the character, I guess, look like this, which is, I think, really far from, well, lewd, I think that's far from nude. And I bet that's exactly as far as it goes as a Chinese game. I think, though, you just put it on the wish list and think about it. I definitely would think fairly hard about whether I was going to go actually commit to purchasing that. Let me start a Duel live stream here and scroll down my Twitter feed and see if there's anything else worth mentioning. Here's a couple of examples of DeviantArt trying to build up enthusiasm and regain the control of the narrative around their dream up artificial intelligent concept, where they have some llamas. I imagine at a certain level DeviantArt doesn't want to just admit that most of its site is adult content or weird content, but it is mostly that. It's in the name, you really can't get away from that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if DreamUp as an artificial image generator is not just stabilized diffusion with a different learning set, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it might be a different attempt at it. Although I really would question where I would really question whether DeviantArt would have the programmers compared to Google to make their own artificial intelligence things. Yeah, we can see that this controversy, apparently they reacted to it very fast, and I guess you should applaud them for that. 2 hours ago they said, update, we've heard the community feedback and now all deviations are automatically labeled as not authorized for use in AI datasets. This tag is not something that really forces anybody to not go and steal art from the website and put it in their AI dataset if they wanted to. And there is seemingly no separation here between whether you would want DreamUp's DeviantArt's AI image creator to use it, but nobody else's. So there's room there for them to certainly still improve as far as options. They also said we've updated the terms of service specific to AI generated content and how third parties must respect artists' declarations to be opted out of AI datasets. So, like, it's a bad launch to say the least. They should have done some testing and done some surveying and gotten some feedback. This screams that there's some CEO at DeviantArt that was trying to push through an idea and hope that it just went under the radar and then got yelled back down, which it does highlight the power to the people sometimes works as far as yelling at people. But yeah, you definitely don't roll out new products like this without already having the talking points and already addressing concerns that are fairly obvious. I don't think there's really ever been a case where somebody has announced something and then for some surprising, unobvious reason the fan base was against it. It's always very obvious that something, that what's being announced is going to go down poorly. And I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed and it feels a little bit lighter. Not that much lighter, honestly, but a little bit lighter in posts. I know a lot of California SJW type people are off of Twitter and just aren't posting there, but I wasn't following a lot of those people anyway, so my experience is not being affected that much. So yeah, we are coming in under 3 hours, which yay for that. And that will just be the end of this stream. Yep, hopefully my sleep schedule's a little bit better next week. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.